Thank you, Carrie. I want to touch on Mary here, Jesus's mom. Always a little bit difficult to approach these very sacred issues. I've been giving a lot of thought to this over the years, so I'm very intrigued and very moved by your work, the anti-Mary, and the things you've discussed as how feminism is very much the opposite and as a war on the image of Mary and the reality of Mary. So I'll just be there's something very anti-Mary in our culture in general. And so you document all of this, and in general, we can just turn on the TV or even the music now with this sexy red. Her name is the rap, and I'll spare our audience the lyrics. But this is anti-Mary, and there's something. It's very interesting. I was always thinking that the more coarse, I was always wondering, why do they need to make everything so coarse? Because the coarser they make things, then when we become so coarse, we become desensitized, not just to spiritual things, but when they begin to politically take over and rule, we're so desensitized. We're desensitized politically and spiritually. So I'm just thinking out loud here, but there's definitely something very anti-Mary, but it's even, as we know, among Protestants, and I've always been very curious at that, and actually even a little bit frightened by it. And so, just very often, as you can imagine, this will come up with Protestants, and they'll say, you shouldn't worship Mary. We only worship Jesus. And I want to be very careful here with what I say. We have to be careful in using the Lord's name in vain. But when they always say we only worship Jesus, we only worship Jesus as well. But the way that they go on about it, it's a little bit haunting because, for instance, it's always very repetitive with them. It's this ongoing circle of nothingness. We'll explain to them, us Catholics, we don't worship Mary. We don't worship her. We worship Jesus. We honor and venerate Mary. Then they'll say, well, Mary's dead. Okay, so not everyone is dead. Mary's not dead. Then you bring up the book of Revelation where the saints are in heaven asking the Lord for justice for what's happening on earth and etc. And so they start losing that debate that everyone's dead and Mary's dead. And then they start yelling at you that we're confessing to priests. Then you start talking about how Jesus said for us to tell sins to one another. And then all of a sudden we're back to that we worship Mary again. It's just, anyway, I'm sure you know what I'm referring to, but it's haunting. And I've always wondered where does all of this stem from? When Jesus says, John, this is your mother, this is your son. This is Jesus's mom. Why would you be so hostile to the mother of Jesus Christ? I often think that it's what you're writing about too, that behind all of this, behind feminism, behind communism, there's envy, there's some kind of envy and jealousy and resentment. And I've been thinking the last couple years that within the Protestant ranks, maybe there's an envy and jealousy of Jesus's mom, and that there may actually be a hierarchy of who's important to God and to Jesus. And there's certain humans that want to be number one. It's a kind of pretension to equality. And there's an envy of Jesus's mom and her sacred importance. What do you think of that?
I've actually never really thought about it from that angle. I obviously have thought about it plenty, and I know there are so many Protestants that I've engaged with who are being very earnest and genuine, and obviously don't want to offend God. And so I
Yeah,
understand where that's coming from. Obviously,
yeah,
what you're speaking about is a deeper impulse, and I think more on the grand scale of things is back to what we were talking about earlier, is this kind of brokenness that we've been dealing with. We've had abortion on demand since the 1970s. We've had children who have not been raised properly because they've been sent to schools to take care of them. All that, there's so many emotional needs that are not being met. And we have, now we're in the third, fourth generation of that. So I think the bigger issue is the pervasiveness. And I think this is one of the reasons why women are targeted, because it's very hard to feel any kind of attraction towards a mother if you don't actually have a mother that loved you in a right and ordered way. So I think this is why women, like, if you can erase womanhood on the level in which it exists on earth, then it makes it much harder to transition to a godly mother, or not that she's God, but you know what I mean. A one that was the mother of God. So I think you see this also with the same thing with fatherhood. You know, you hear there's all these studies that have been done about men who don't have good fathers and women, and it makes it very difficult for them to actually believe in God. So I think it's just that basic imprint of the mother and father that make it very difficult for people to see clearly. And certainly envy could be part of it. Fear could be part of it. But I think that fundamental not having the being mothered in a proper way, that mother wound, really is a very difficult thing. And I think it's actually one of those things that once people overcome it, the beauty and the healing that can come to women in particular when they start opening themselves up to the idea of what, well, what is God's mother like? That's, a very big question, and leads to all kinds of incredible, beautiful answers that,
Yeah.
no one can anticipate if you have never thought about it before.